I couldn't always see auras, but something happened to me when I was 8. I was at the park with my mother, slinging my way across the monkey bars as fast as I could, when I slipped. My head hit the ground first, and then the world went dark. When I came to, my mother was cradling my head and stroking my hair gently. My mouth tasted of pennies and my head throbbed painfully. "Allie, sweetie? Are you okay?" she asked. I only groaned in response, from the piercing pain that felt to be stabbing me somewhere deep inside my head. I rubbed my eyes and looked up at my mom, and that's when I saw it, her aura and its wonderful mix of colors floating all around her. The pain went away, but the sight stayed. I could see everyone for who they were now, their naked personalities on full display for me. Usually, I was enamored with the complexity that people showed. So many colors. Some good and some bad, some seemingly contradicting with others, and I guess that's just the duality of man. Everyone has good, everyone has some bad. But then there was the man who had stepped onto the subway train one night. There was nothing complex about him, God no. I had been sitting alone in an empty carriage until he stepped on. My job as an apprentice chef has me working late, and by the time we finish last seating and then the cleaning of the kitchen, I'm usually only on my way home in the very early hours of the morning. And I wouldn't take the subway train if I could help it, but my pay sucks and I have enough trouble paying rent. Forget about a car or even enough scratch to take a cab home every night. I noticed the man's aura instantly. It was a hard one to miss. The sight of it was enough to chill the marrow in my bones. I had only seen one like it before, on the television, when the cops were perp walking a serial killer into a courtroom. There was a lot of red, and red meant aggressiveness. And though everyone does have their aggressive side, even I have my red streaks, this man's aura was almost entirely red, only save for the thin lines of purple that ran through his aura like veins. That purple made it worse. That purple meant rot, instability, something deeply and dangerously wrong with his mind. And there was no good, no green in this man. Not even the faintest shred of it. The subway had bench seats running along the carriage's sides. He sat far away from me at first, down on the far end of the carriage to my left. His scrappy aesthetic fit well with the stained floors and graffiti-marred window of the subway. His jet black hair was matted on his sweaty forehead, his long stubbly beard patchy, and his clothes rugged and dirty. The subway doors closed, and the train got moving again. The guy picked up a newspaper on the seat beside him and started flipping through, though I had a feeling he wasn't really paying attention to the words the paper. Then the subway light flickered and went out. A moment of darkness. When it came back on, I was sure the man had slid over a few seats in the dark. He was definitely sitting closer to me now. I glanced his way, a quick peek out the corner of my eye. That evil aura gave me a shiver. I looked right, through the gangway connections and down the line of carriages. They rocked and snaked their way around the track. On the straight sections, when all the carriages line up perfectly, I could see the train was empty. My stomach fluttered. I was alone with him, and even when we got to the next stop I probably wouldn't find much help there either. Most people steer clear of the subway at night these days, and I would too if not for necessity. Crime was getting worse in my city, and police shortages were becoming noticeable. The cops used to patrol the subway stations like hawks. Lately they were nowhere to be seen. My friend had been mugged 3 months back. He had been beaten unconscious, his watch, wallet and phone stolen. He was still in bad shape, not physically but mentally. Yellow, anxiety, was creeping all over his aura, lining the edges, tapering through the center and eating away at the other colors. He was afraid to leave his apartment now. I was determined not to let myself fall victim to the same fate, and it was about this time I started to wonder if the pepper spray I carried around in my handbag was a good enough defense. The subway's brakes whined and the train lurched. It rolled up to another empty platform. The doors hissed open. Neither of us moved. There was a moment of strained silence. I swallowed hard, saliva crackling down my throat. I briefly considered making a run for it, but before I could commit to the action, the doors shut and the train continued. I picked up my handbag from the seat next to me and put it in my lap, hugging it close with both arms. The lights flickered and once again went out, the carriage sinking into darkness. I could feel the man's presence in the dark, an unnerving feeling pressing on my skin like a blind in the air. I shivered again. I often marveled at the complexity displayed in people's auras, but in a way I was equally amazed, perhaps morbidly so, at the simplicity of this man's aura. The pure wickedness, the rot, the hate. How could one be so vile? How many people had he hurt before? How many would he go on to hurt if he could? The lights came back on. He had moved over in the dark again and was sitting much closer now. Too close. I looked his way. He was staring, his dark eyes burning right through me. My heart froze, an iciness in my chest that took my breath. The man smirked, showing his crooked and yellowing teeth. It was then his aura started to morph. I had never seen anything like it, or anything so terrifying in someone's aura before. When he bared those mangled teeth in his vicious grin, his aura darkened. The red turned to a deep shade of maroon, and the purple veins became black as death. I let out a shuddering breath. This was no man, this was a monster. When I couldn't bear the sight of his aura anymore, I looked forward, at myself in the window opposite that turned reflective with a bright fluorescent glare. Many yellow dots skittered through my aura, much like the nerves did in my gut. And my red streaks were glowing brightly. The light went out. Darkness. There was a ruffling sound, a soft thump as the man's newspaper hit the ground. Heavy footsteps thudded over the floor. I slipped a hand into my purse, found what I was looking for. I spotted a shadow in the dark, moving closer toward me. I stood, steadying myself against the rocking carriage. The lights flickered in several short bursts. The scene played out like a slideshow, the man, his wicked glare and his nasty smirk, all drawing closer with each brief stab of light. Then uninterrupted darkness returned as the flickering stopped. His shadow loomed large before me, close enough to feel his putrid breath on my face. Then a bright flash of light and a deafening bang. The lights flickered back on. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the barrel of my gun. I could hear nothing but a high-pitched whine, and the muffled, frenzied thump of my pulse. A bloody gurgle escaped the man's throat. He coughed up a thick globule of blood, coating his chin. Beads of blood ran down his neck. He looked down at his wound incredulously, prodding at it as if to confirm it was real. His shirt soaked through with an ever-growing circle of red. The hole in his chest pumped out dark, thick blood in erratic and weakening throbs. The train's brakes screeched, sounding fuzzy and far away, and the train lurched. I groped for a pole to keep my balance. The man fell flat on his face with a heavy thud. The blood pooled under his body, seeping outward. There was one final lurch as the train stopped. I stared at the man on the ground, then at the gun in my hand. My fingers were numb, and my hand was shaking. Waves of nausea threatened to bring up the contents of my stomach. My knees gave out and I collapsed back into the seat, eyes wide and mouth agape in shock. Everything felt surreal, like nothing more than a terrible dream. If only it was. And I watched the man's aura and its wicked colors fade away into nothing. At the edge of the sheer cliffs of Coastal Island, just a few miles west of our small town, stands a tree at the edge of two worlds. You can drive up and down the Irish cliffs and not see another tree like it, a tree perched so precariously at the drop-off as it faces the brunt of salty ocean spray and blustering winds. It is an old tree. It is a strong tree. And it is a haunted tree. Legend has it that, sometime in the 1800s, a young sailor's wife had lost her husband after he had set sail one summer and never returned. For years the young woman waited for him, driven by a strong bond of love and loyalty, and despite the obvious fate of her husband, she never remarried, and she never moved on. Her heart wouldn't allow it. Every day she would trek to the cliffside and spend her time with the tree. They would sit at the edge, only each other for company as they kept watchful eye over the North Atlantic, and she clung desperately to any shred of hope that her husband might return. So, she waited. And waited. And waited. She waited close to 10 years, waited until the grief became too much, waited until the last smoldering embers of hope had been utterly extinguished in her chest. It was then she made one last hike to the tree. With a heavy heart weighing in her chest, she stepped over the edge of the cliff, and let the sea take her the same way it had taken her love. They say she haunts the tree to this day, I said. They say the tree should be dead, but her spirit has become intertwined with its roots, the whispers of her soul giving the tree new life. They say, they say, they say. Dylan mocked. They seem to say a lot of things. A frigid night breeze sliced through the park, whistling through dead branches. You laugh, I said, but I think it's true. There have been sightings, you know. People say they've seen her ghost at the tree. And if you get too close, she'll send you over the edge. And why the hell would she do that? A sacrifice. That was my other friend, Larry. He took a drag on his cigarette, the ember bright in the wan moonlight. She sacrifices a live soul to the sea in the hopes it will return her husband's. Dylan laughed. You two are a couple of planks. He took a swig of Jack Daniels, grimaced, handed the bottle to me. You really don't believe that shit, do you? I shrugged, sipped some Jack. It burned, but it was warm, perfect for a late autumn night. By the way, you'll owe me big time for that, Larry said, pointing to the bottle. Dad's going to give me a good belting when he sees I swiped it. What about you? Dylan asked Larry. You believe all that shit? I don't know. There have been an oddly high number of disappearances around here over the years. And remember the police found a missing tourist's phone by the tree a few years back, I said. Dylan laughed again. And they said he was drunk and wandered off the edge of the cliff. My sister and her friends went up there once. Larry paused, taking a long drag on his cigarette. She said her one friend, Maureen, started acting strange up there. When they got close to the tree, she started to wander off ahead of them, toward the edge. Sis said she was reaching out at the sea with one hand and muttering something, like she was in a trance. They had to pull her back to stop her, and it took her a while to snap out of it. And Maureen remembers none of it. Dylan made a mocking ghostly wail, pantomiming trembling hands. You laugh, I said, but I bet you wouldn't have the balls to go up there and touch the tree yourself. Yeah, I would, no problem. Go on then. Fuck that, too cold. See? You're too scared yourself. In fact, I can see you pissing your pants right now. Fuck off, wanker. I'll go up there if you wanted to make it worth my while. He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together. I could use the money to get my little brother a Christmas gift. Larry took a final drag on his cig and flicked it away. He looked up to the sky thoughtfully as he blew the smoke upward, where it carried away on the breeze. Tell you what, you go up there and touch the tree, not only will you not owe me for the Jack Daniels, but I'll throw in a tenner. Yeah, I said. I'll chuck in 10 quid too. Dylan smiled. You muppets, easiest money I'll ever make. We rode our bikes as far as the road would take us, then went the rest of the way on foot. We trekked under the stars and full moon, over the pale green grass, toward the cliffside where the sea crashed thunderously somewhere below. The tree stood in the blustering wind, silhouetted against the stars. The ocean stretched out before it, a black expanse that went on forever into the distance. A sudden, strong feeling that we should not go further came over me. I shivered, from the dread as much as the freezing wind. I stopped, the tree standing no further than 50 meters before us. I didn't want to take a single step closer. We should forget it, I said. Let's go back. Dylan looked me up and down and laughed. A condescending, breaking your balls laugh that usually would rile me up, but I didn't care about that right then. I glanced at Larry, his arms were wrapped around himself, his shoulders raised and shivering. His eyes conveyed the very same worry I felt in my blood. We had a deal, Dylan said. I'm getting my money. I'll pay you the money anyway, I said. But this doesn't seem like a great idea. Same, Larry chimed in. You get your money regardless, but something doesn't feel right. Let's get out of here. Dylan looked at the tree. A wave crashed into the cliffside. He looked back to us, eyes full of bravado. I realized then this wasn't just about the money anymore. He had to prove something, no matter how pointless. I didn't come all this way to pussy out now like you two. I'll show you there's nothing to be so scared about. He started for the tree, and we watched him go. Something doesn't feel right, Larry muttered again. I knew what he meant. I had always taken the legends with a grain of salt, and I had only brought it up that night for a bit of fun. But there was something wrong with the air, a rip, a tear, a flaw, a slight but undeniable feeling. At that moment, legends didn't seem like a bit of harmless fun, nor did they seem so outlandish or exaggerated. They felt all too real. Dylan had made it to the tree, pressed his palm against it, and stood there. I hadn't realized it, but I was holding my breath. I let it out, the plume swiftly whisked away with the wind. He's not moving, Larry said. Then it happened. Mist seeped from the ground around the tree, rising like ghostly roots. Tendrils of fog swirled around Dylan. He removed his hand from the tree. It hung limply at his side. He stared blankly, his shoulders slack. Then he turned toward the ocean. He stood at the very edge of the cliff while the mist swirled around him in thin whispers. What the fuck is that? What is he doing? Larry asked. Dylan's arms rose slowly, reaching out for the ocean like how a child may reach for their mother. We took off running then. We called Dylan's name, but he didn't seem to hear us. He stood unmoving at the edge with outstretched arms. The mist swirled around him, seemingly caressing him with a subtle but firm grip. The black abyss lay below, smashing hungrily into earth. We sprinted as fast as we could. We tried to get there. We were close. But not close enough. Dylan took a single step, and vanished over the edge.